Welcome to How to Be an Effective Product Manager. This deck is largely targeted at first-time product managers who are trying to figure out how to be incredibly effective in their day jobs, but I'm sure mid-career product managers will also take away some important things from this. Right, so let's jump in. Essentially, I've broken down the skills and systems that every effective PM should have into three parts. Think of it sort of as the human body. So there's the skeletal and muscular part, right? Sort of the core set of skills that you need. Then there's the circulatory stuff, which is usually process. And the last bit is the nervous system, right? Which is people, the connections across the body. So essentially, these three skills are what I have essentially distilled down all PM skills into: the core skills, the process-oriented skills, and the people-oriented skills. So I'm going to take you through each one of these, right, over this deck to see what essentially you have to do to be more effective in your job, right? So let's start with the first one, right, which is core. Spend majority of your time in the problem space, right? Now, this is interesting because ever since we were kids, what we learned was that, hey, given an examination paper, start solving, start answering questions. And now this is at the core of our instinct as a PM as well, that the moment you're presented with a problem, your first instinct is to figure out an answer. Good PMs resist the urge to do this. Jumping to quick answers does not help. What you really need to dig into and spend more time in is, why does this problem exist in the first place? Why are you the right person to solve this problem? Why would people care if you solve this problem, right? So it is much more important to spend time in the problem space as opposed to being in the solution space. And what I mean by that is that you need to keep re-articulating the problem till you're able to get to the core of what the right problem statement is. The answers will then become very obvious. A great example of this is the classic Henry Ford quote, where he said that if I had asked people, they would have asked me to build faster horses. Now, Henry Ford was very clear that what people didn't care about were faster horses, in the sense that if he had misinterpreted the problem statement, he would have either built better roads, or started a company which built horseshoes, or started breeding faster, stronger horses, right? Or build better carriages. But he didn't do either of this. He kept reframing the problem till he arrived at a new problem statement. People want to get from point A to point B in a faster, more secure way, and horses just don't cut it, and horse carriages just don't cut it. And which is why he built cars. So the most straightforward answers are not necessarily the right answers. The moment you're presented with a problem statement and you start answering it, that's not the right approach. As a PM, you have to do your homework. You have to keep asking why, and you have to ask why before you get into the how and what, which is the tactics and the execution of getting something done. The strategy is at the core of why, and this is why this is such a core skill for PMs. So 42 is the answer to life, the universe, and everything, but 42 is not relevant. It's the question that you ask which is more relevant. Always be deconstructing. Now, this goes to the heart of curiosity as a product manager. When confronted with products, and all of us have hundreds of products on our phones, on our desktops, as a PM, are you always deconstructing? Are you always trying to figure out what about these products works, what about them doesn't work, and why doesn't it work? And these are essentially the set of questions that you need to be asking yourself. So you really like using a product. Why do you like using the product? Why does this product work for you? If you don't like something about it, what is it that you don't like? Why doesn't it work well for you? And if you were the PM on that product, how would you have fixed this problem? And then the last question, which sort of goes towards a bigger strategy. If this product was your competitor, how would you build something which is 10x better? So deconstructing is something that you have to constantly do as a PM, right? It's about feeding your curiosity and always being in the know when it comes to new products. Adopt an experimenter's mindset, and this is an important one. Right? Good PMs have this amazing core skill that they are able to adopt an experimenter's mindset. And what does that mean? There are three primary things which experimenters do. First thing is about setting the experiment correctly. Second bit is about measuring the results. The third thing is whatever you learn from this experiment, you use those results to build better experiments in the future. So essentially what we learned in labs when we were in school are things that we have to apply to product management as well, and to our philosophy of building products, right? Setting up an experiment is also about having the right set of tools, having the right sort of experimenting set, having the ability to measure, but also having a very clear sense of what constitutes success and what constitutes failure. Measuring is very, very critical, because if you don't measure, you don't know if you've done well or not. And then it's about taking these results, interpreting them, inferring the right insights, and using that to build better experiments. And this loop, this experimenter's mindset loop, is very, very critical to your journey as a PM. Use first principles thinking. Now, this is easier said than done, and first principles thinking is one of those extremely abused term in the ecosystem, in the tech ecosystem. What essentially is first principles thinking? First principle thinking essentially is that, what if I asked you to define what a triangle is, but I told you that, hey, you cannot use the percepts of geometry. So Euclidean geometry, there is a point in space, an infinite number of lines can pass through this point, two parallel lines never meet to each other. These are the core assumptions, the core principles on which geometry is built. But what if you didn't have this? What if you didn't have Euclidean geometry to guide you, and then I asked you to explain geometry to me? You would essentially have to build geometry from scratch. You would essentially have to define what is a plane. You would have to define the concept of a point. You would have to define the concept of a line and a line segment, right? And then build out your own geometry. And non-Euclidean geometry actually does this. There are different ways of defining geometry, right? Different types of geometries. This essentially is first principles thinking. In the absence of any knowledge, in the absence of existing constructs, are you able to think from first principles? And this is very, very effective when you are building a product in an area where a product does not exist, right? It is literally trying to solve a problem which does not have a solution till now, and where there are no existing playbooks, where you can't look at other products and other people and figure out, oh, they did this, so I'm going to do exactly that, or I'm just going to change my tactics a little bit. It's about building something from scratch, something at its very core. And this is why first principles thinking is very, very important. This is one of my favorites, right? Learn the difference between attitudinal and behavioral user research methods. Now, as a PM, user research is a very critical skill to have. But understanding the difference between what is attitudinal, which is what users say, and behavioral, which is what users do, is very, very critical. So, you do a few user interviews and you're trying to understand people. Say you worked for an edtech and you're talking to parents and you're trying to understand parents' behaviors and attitudes towards education. Now in India, you talk to a lot of parents and they would say things like, hey, I really want my kid to fall in love with math and science, and I want them to really, really do well, right? So their attitude is one of learning. That is, I want my kids to learn more. But if you actually observe their behavior, you would realize that a lot of parents err on the side of marks. The fact that they define success as getting more marks in school and doing better in exams, which doesn't necessarily point to the fact that their kids love the subject or have built a deep understanding of the subject. So behavior says parents favor marks, but attitude, as in when you speak to them, they will talk about the aspiration that they have that their kids fall in love. Now, it's not that they are lying to you. Behavior is what they do right now. So behavior tells you what you need to do in the short term to satisfy your user base. And in this case, it would be the parents. But attitudinal tells you what their aspirations are and what you need to build in the future. Can you solve for the present, which is behavior, and can you solve for the future, which is attitudinal, right? This a very core set of skills, and sort of on this X and Y axis of attitude and behavior, there are a whole bunch of different user research methods, and you should become familiar with all of them. It's an important way of figuring out what you want to build. Right. Another core skill is building breadth. Building breadth as a PM is very, very critical. PMs are known to be jack of all trades, but it's also very important to build depth in a few areas. If you don't build depth, then just being a jack of all trades does not work out. At your core, you need to be deep in a few areas, at least to start off with one area, and then over time build more deeper sets of skills. But this sort of classic T-shaped personality, the reason Mr. T's picture is there, is the classic. You have breadth and then you have depth in a few areas. At an org level, it's also very important for you to be aware of the skills that you don't have, the depth that you don't have, so that you can get matched with people with complementary skill sets. So people who have depth in other areas, work with them. It'll make your life easier, and putting together a group of such people together leads to a lot of success. Now we come to the second part, which is people. Right, we've covered a bunch of core skills, and now we want to talk about the people skills. Practice enlightened self-interest. Now, enlightened self-interest is slightly different from altruism. Right, there are two parts to this. There is the enlightened part, which we'll talk about, but there is the self-interest part. Right, what this essentially says is that go out of your way to help people. Right, you help people not with the hopes of getting anything back in return. But you help people because it's the right thing to do. That is the enlightened part. But the self-interest part is that the more you help people and the more you are able to add value to people, amazing amount of value gets added to you in the long term. So yes, there is a slight bit of self-interest involved when you help people. It's not that you expect something from them in return immediately, but what you would see is that this is perhaps, we always talk about like, hey, I want to network and I want to have more people who are great in my network, but the way you actually do that is through enlightened self-interest, right? You are enlightened enough to know that there are no easy wins, there are no easy returns. It's not a give and take process. You help people out for the sake of helping people out. But over time, you're doing this out of self-interest because over time, the dividends are incredibly rich, right? And in a long enough career, you would realize that practicing enlightened self-interest is of great, great value. Peddle your wares to your teammates. Now, this is really, really important because your first users are actually not external people. Your first users are essentially your own teammates. So your roadmap, your sprint plans, your product requirement documents. These are all products that you own and create for your teammates first, your first users. So you have to set a very high quality bar with this. This is how you build credibility. This is how you help build great products, because your responsibility is to start off with to your teammates. Next up, articulate the vision and mission. Now, this is something that all of us forget. We build a great why for our product. Why are we building this product? We have a great vision and mission, but we actually fail to say this to the people who work with us. As a PM, articulating the vision and mission for your team is one of the most important skills that you have, because you win only when your team wins, and your team can only win if they are moving towards one direction, if they have clear direction and purpose to work with. And that only happens if you are able to set a great vision and mission for them. So while your users care about the why, so does your team. Easier said than done. Another one of those things, build trust within your team. Now, there are no active ways of building trust. Trust gets built over time. You spend time and effort with people. You go through ups and downs of building a product with people, and that's how trust gets created. But the things that are in your control are that you have to set incredibly high standards and deliver. If you are someone who over promises and under delivers, then that's a sure shot way of losing trust with people. you can't lowball also. So you can't sort of under promise and then deliver and expect to create trust. So you have to set high standards. You have to go above and beyond and deliver. And that's the only control that you have when it comes to building trust. Now, let's move from people to processes. One of the things that PMs and sort of teams these days are fond of saying is that, hey, you should multitask. And, we sort of misunderstand multitasking. In reality, human beings can't multitask. You can't do multiple things simultaneously. You can be good at multiple things, but at any given point, you have to do one thing and you have to do that really, really well. And then you can move on to the next thing. This is also, by the way, very, very true for your product, right? In your product, your user has to do one thing and one thing well, and then the user moves on to the next thing. If you try and get your user to do multiple things, your product is most likely going to fail. Bringing order to chaos. Now, part of product management is project management, and it's about process building, and it's about enabling your teammates to do their best work. And for that, you have to be on point. You have to adopt process. You have to really live by it. So what does that mean? It means running daily scrums. It means running stand-ups. It means that you are always prepared before a meeting. You send in agendas. You send in pre-reads to people. You take notes. You take extensive notes so that when people walk out of meetings, they know exactly what their action items are. You make sure that you follow up on them. You make sure that people's time is effectively spent, so you have shorter meetings, more effective meetings. And you use whatever tools are available at your disposal, so whether it's Jira or Asana or whiteboarding. You do all of these things because this is how you ensure that your team wins. The two pizza rule. The two pizza rule was made famous by Jeff Bezos and Amazon. What it essentially says is that small pods which can be fed by two large pizzas are the right size, right? And what that essentially means is that you as a PM are essentially the pod owner, and there's a designer with you, there are a bunch of front-end and back-end engineers with you, and a few folks from QA, essentially a group of 8-9 people who are responsible for delivering a great product or a part of the product end to end, right? And the two pizza rule also sort of defines your scope, your area of influence. So of course you might grow in your career and have influence over multiple pods, but to begin with, your area of influence will be your pod, right? And that should be you should be able to feed it with two large pizzas. That's the amount of work that you have to generate, right? The joke that I always have is that why do PMs exist in pods? Because somebody has to pay for the pizza, and that's why PMs exist. So these are some of the things which I have learned over the years and which I've sort of internalized, I've adopted, and these are bits of advice that I've given to PMs over the years. And I thought it'd be good if I put all of these things together to sort of talk about essentially what helps build and what helps turn you into an incredibly effective PM. So thank you. Do send me your notes, your questions, and if you have any other thoughts, if there are things that you feel I've missed out on, do chime in. Take care. Bye-bye.